Welcome to Reddit Nightmares, where the internet's most disturbing true confessions come to life. Hit subscribe if you're brave enough for more real horror confessions that will follow you into your dreams.
Have you ever felt that primal fear of being watched? That ancient instinct sending chills down your spine, telling you that you're not alone, even when your eyes insist that you are. For those who venture into the wilderness, this feeling isn't just common, it's a survival mechanism. What happens when that feeling is justified? When something is watching you from just beyond the tree line? When that creeping sensation of dread turns out to be correct? This is the story of Marcus Wheeler, a 29-year-old experienced solo hiker who learned the hard way that sometimes the forest keeps what enters it. Sometimes, when you're all alone in the wilderness, the worst thing that can happen is discovering you're not alone at all. Let me take you to the remote backwoods of Olympic National Forest, where last October, Marcus embarked on what was supposed to be a routine 3-day excursion, a trip that would change his understanding of reality forever. The morning of October 12th felt perfect for camping. Crisp autumn air, leaves turning brilliant shades of orange and red, and just enough cloud cover to keep the sun from beating down too harshly. Marcus had been planning the solo trip for months, a necessary escape from the crushing pressure of his job as an emergency room nurse. After witnessing trauma day in and day out, the isolation of the forest was his therapy. I needed space to breathe, Marcus told me when I interviewed him. Just me, my thoughts, and nowhere I needed to be for 3 whole days. He'd chosen a lesser-known trail that branched off from the main hiking paths, one that required special backcountry permits, and led to secluded camping areas rarely visited this late in the season. Marcus had done his research thoroughly, mapped his route, checked weather forecasts, and packed appropriately for the autumn conditions. By all accounts, he was a model of preparation. The first 5 hours of hiking went exactly as planned. Marcus made good time, stopping occasionally to photograph particularly striking views or curious wildlife. He'd seen 3 deer, countless squirrels, and even caught a glimpse of what he thought might be a fox darting between the underbrush. Normal, natural, nothing to suggest what was coming. By mid-afternoon, Marcus reached a small clearing about half a mile from Crescent Lake. Though it wasn't on any official map, it was perfect. A flat, grassy area surrounded by towering Douglas firs and western hemlocks, with enough open sky above to see the stars at night. I remember thinking how lucky I was to find it, Marcus said, his voice growing quieter as he recalled the memory. It felt like the forest was offering me exactly what I needed. He set up camp methodically, pitching his forest green 2-person tent. He preferred the extra space even when hiking alone, arranging his cooking equipment near a small fire pit that previous hikers had constructed and hanging his food in a bear bag from a sturdy branch about 50 yards from his sleeping area. Everything by the book, everything safe. As the evening approached, Marcus cooked a simple meal of dehydrated chili, enjoyed a tin cup of whiskey, and watched as the sky darkened and the stars emerged. The night was clear and cold, dropping to about 40 degrees, chilly, but comfortable in his sleeping bag rated for much colder conditions. I fell asleep almost instantly, Marcus recalled. The kind of deep sleep you only get when you're miles from civilization and your body has been pushed physically all day. But at approximately 2:17 a.m., Marcus remembered checking his watch. He jolted awake. At first, he couldn't identify what had disturbed him. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No wind rustling through leaves. No nocturnal animals scurrying about. Just an oppressive, waiting silence. Then he heard it. The unmistakable sound of a tent zipper, the specific synthetic zip that anyone who's ever been camping knows intimately. But it wasn't coming from his tent. It was coming from outside, from across the clearing. Marcus froze, his breath catching in his throat. He hadn't seen another soul on the trail all day. The nearest designated campsite was over 3 miles away, and he was certain, absolutely certain, that he had been alone when he'd fallen asleep. My first thought was that someone had followed me, Marcus explained. Maybe another hiker who got lost after dark and saw my cleared area. But something felt wrong. The sound was too slow, too deliberate. Not someone fumbling in the dark, but someone who wanted me to hear them. For several minutes, Marcus lay perfectly still in his sleeping bag. straining to hear any movement outside. The silence returned, heavy and watchful. He debated his options. Call out to a potential stranger, pretend to be asleep, or look outside. Years of emergency room work had taught Marcus to control his fear, to think clearly even in high-stress situations. He reached slowly for his flashlight and hunting knife, keeping both close as he inched toward his tent's entrance. I kept telling myself there was a rational explanation, he said. A late hiker, maybe a ranger doing checks. Anything but what my gut was screaming at me. With trembling fingers, Marcus unzipped his own tent just enough to peer out into the clearing. Sound effect. Marcus's tent zipper, slower and more cautious. The moon was nearly full, casting everything in a silvery blue light that made the scene before him seem otherworldly. And there, directly across from his own tent, perhaps 30 feet away, was another tent, identical to his own. Same forest green color, same model, same size, even set up at the same angle, facing the remnants of his campfire. I thought I was hallucinating, Marcus whispered during our interview, his hands visibly shaking at the memory. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, but it was still there, a perfect copy of my tent, where nothing had been when I'd fallen asleep. Marcus's first instinct was to call out, to demand an explanation from whoever had set up camp so close to his in the middle of the night. Something stopped him, that same primal instinct that had woken him in the first place, because surrounding the mysterious tent was undisturbed ground. No footprints, no drag marks from equipment, no disturbed leaves or twigs. It was as if the tent had materialized out of thin air. That's when true fear hit me, Marcus admitted. Not the adrenaline kind that makes you want to fight or run. The paralyzing kind that turns your blood to ice and makes you question your own sanity. For what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes, Marcus watched the other tent, searching for any sign of movement within. The tent remained still, its entrance faced his own, the zipper pulled halfway up as if its occupant had been interrupted while entering or exiting. Eventually, Marcus's survival instinct kicked in. He needed to know if he was in danger. With agonizing slowness, he pulled on his boots without tying them, gripped his knife in one hand and flashlight in the other, and fully emerged from his tent. The night air hit him like an electric shock, every nerve ending in his body screaming danger. Still, he forced himself to stand and face the mysterious tent. From this vantage point, the similarity was even more unnerving. Not just the same model and color, but the same small tear near the bottom corner that his tent had sustained on a previous trip. The same waterproofing patch on a rainfly. Even the same slight lean to the left where one stake hadn't gone in quite as deeply. It was, for all intents and purposes, his tent, a mirror duplicate. I called out, Marcus said, just once. Hello, that's all I could manage. My voice sounded wrong, like it was being swallowed by the air around me. No response came from the tent. Not a sound, not a movement. Marcus gathered what courage remained and took a step forward. Then another. His flashlight beam trembled across the clearing as he approached the mysterious shelter. 10 feet away, 5 feet, and then he was standing before it, the beam of light illuminating the half-open entrance. The interior was dark, but something caught the light, a reflection of some kind from inside. Every horror movie I've ever seen was screaming in my head not to look inside, Marcus said. But I had to know. I had to see what was in there. Knife raised offensively, Marcus crouched down and shined his light through the opening. The tent was not empty. Inside was a sleeping bag, also identical to his own, laid out neatly. But this sleeping bag was different in one crucial way. It was covered in dark stains. Stains that Marcus, with his medical background, immediately recognized as blood, a lot of blood, dried into the fabric in patterns that suggested violence. But there was no body, no person, just a blood-soaked sleeping bag and a small object placed deliberately in the center. Marcus's car keys, the same keys he'd locked in his vehicle at the trailhead parking lot 6 miles away. I lost it then, Marcus admitted. Complete fight or flight response. I backpedaled so fast I fell, scrambled back to my tent on all fours like an animal. His hands shaking violently, Marcus grabbed his essential gear, water bottle, phone, though there was no service, emergency GPS beacon, knife, and stuffed them into his day pack. Whatever was happening, he wasn't staying to find out more. The logical part of his brain that had been struggling to find rational explanations had finally shut down, overwhelmed by primitive terror. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the other tent as he backed toward the tree line. That's when he noticed something else, something that turned his fear into absolute horror. The other tent's entrance was now fully zip-closed. No one had exited. No one had approached it. But the entrance that had been halfway open moments before was now securely sealed. Marcus ran, abandoning his campsite, most of his gear, even his hiking boots, which he'd forgotten to tie and lost somewhere in the underbrush. He fled blindly into the forest. The moon provided just enough light to prevent him from running into trees, but not enough to find a trail. It didn't matter. His only thought was to put distance between himself and that clearing. For hours, he pushed through the forest, disoriented but driven by pure survival instinct. When dawn finally broke, Marcus found himself at the edge of Crescent Lake, miles from where he'd intended to be. His feet were bleeding, his clothes torn from branches and thorns, but he was alive. It took him most of the day to find a main trail, and another 2 hours to reach a ranger station. The park rangers were alarmed by his condition and his story, though they clearly didn't believe his account of a duplicate tent appearing from nowhere. They thought I'd been drugged or had suffered some kind of psychological break, Marcus explained. They kept asking if I was on any medications, if I had a history of sleepwalking or night terrors. A search party was organized to recover Marcus's abandoned equipment and investigate his claims. What they found, or rather, didn't find, only deepened the mystery. There was no second tent, just Marcus's original campsite. His gear scattered as if he'd left in a hurry. His tent was still there, exactly as he'd left it. Inside, his sleeping bag was laid out normally, but two details validated Marcus's experience. First, his car keys, which he was certain he'd locked in his vehicle, were found inside his tent, placed carefully in the center of his sleeping bag. Second, and more disturbing, was what the rangers found when they examined his sleeping bag more closely. Though it appeared normal at first glance, when they pulled it into the sunlight, they discovered faint, brownish stains throughout the fabric. Laboratory tests later confirmed it was human blood, a significant amount of it, that had been somehow cleaned but left microscopic residue. And it wasn't Marcus's blood type. In the weeks following the incident, Marcus suffered from severe insomnia and PTSD symptoms. He couldn't bring himself to sleep in enclosed spaces and moved temporarily to his brother's guest room, where he insisted on keeping the door open and lights on throughout the night. The worst part is what I experienced, Marcus told me, his eyes fixed on some distant point. It's the implications. Was it a warning? A glimpse of something that hasn't happened yet? Or did happen in some other reality? Rangers conducted additional sweeps of the area, but found nothing unusual. No reports of missing hikers matched the time frame. No other campers reported strange experiences in that section of forest. The case was eventually filed away as unexplained, likely the result of exhaustion and isolation playing tricks on an overstressed mind. But Marcus knows what he saw, and he's not the only one. During my research for this story, I uncovered 3 similar incidents in the same general area of Olympic National Forest over the past decade. Each involved solo hikers or campers who reported seeing duplicate or mirror versions of their own camps. In one case from 2017, a woman described finding her own backpack, which she was wearing at the time, hanging from a tree 30 yards from her campsite, containing photos of herself sleeping that had been taken the previous night. Park authorities have no official explanation, though theories range from elaborate pranks to carbon monoxide poisoning from improper campfire ventilation. The local indigenous people, however, have their own explanation, according to a tribal elder I spoke with who requested anonymity. Certain areas of the forest are known as thin places, locations where the barrier between our world and another becomes permeable. The other side looks through sometimes. The elder told me, it studies us, learns our ways, makes copies that aren't quite right. It's been happening since before Europeans came here. That's why our people had strict rules about where to camp and when to leave an area immediately. Marcus Wheeler never returned to hiking or camping. He eventually left his job at the emergency room, unable to handle the additional stress after his experience. Today, he works as a telehealth nurse from the safety of a high-rise apartment in downtown Seattle, as far from isolated forest as he can get. "I still have the sleeping bag," he confessed at the end of our interview, "sealed in plastic in a storage unit across town. Sometimes I think about having more tests done on the blood, but then I ask myself, do I really want to know who it belonged to? Or worse, who it belonged to?" As for the clearing where it all happened, rangers now report that nothing grows there. What was once a grassy area perfect for camping has become a barren patch of dirt where not even weeds take root. They place the area off limits due to environmental concerns. So the next time you're camping and hear that distinctive sound of a tent zipper in the night, take a moment. Ask yourself, are you sure it's coming from your tent? Are you absolutely certain you're alone? Because Marcus Wheeler was certain too, until the moment he wasn't. And somewhere in Olympic National Forest, in a clearing where nothing grows, something waits. Patient, watching, learning. There was another tent. If this story sent chills down your spine, remember to share your own camping horror stories in the comment below. What's the strangest thing you've ever encountered in the wilderness? The forest is always listening. And so, am I